What's going on YouTube? Welcome back to the Fantasy Football Scout YouTube channel with me, Lee, and this is Sam from FPLFamily. Now, Sam, new for this season, right here on the FF Scout YouTube channel, we're going to be discussing the big question of the week. The question that's on everybody's lips. No surprises what the question is on everybody's lips this week. And I must admit, when I saw Big Rom, when I saw Romelu Lukaku coming into Chelsea, I was tipping Chelsea to do pretty well this year anyway.
Yeah.
But with Lukaku coming in, they, I think, are title favourites. I think he's the missing piece in the jigsaw. But we're going to discuss, particularly in this video, when is the right time to get on Lukaku, if at all, because he's 11.5, don't forget. There's a few FPL managers out there that are thinking, how do I fit this guy in? I've got Salah, I've got Bruno. I might even want to have a cheeky look at Harry Kane now that he is confirmed, Sam, staying at Spurs. Note, smile on face. So there's so many premiums knocking about at the minute. How do we get him? So what is your immediate thoughts about Romelu Lukaku?
Yeah, so I think this question actually divides up quite nicely into a lot of different areas. There's the, do I want to own Lukaku? Is he the best asset at Chelsea to go for? Side of the coin. There's the, is he the best forward premium to own in the game? And you've mentioned a certain Harry Kane already.
Yeah.
There's a conversation around those two. And there's a conversation around the sacrifices that you have to make in order to own Lukaku as well. So we can have a little look at all of those things during the course of this video and kind of try and see if we can come to a conclusion about, do we buy Lukaku now? Do we wait for the massive fixture swing, starting with that game against Southampton in game week 7?
Yeah.
Or do we not invest in Lukaku at all? Which, quite frankly, is a little bit of a scary thought given what we saw from him in game week 2. Now, the radar graph that we've got on the screen there comes from Lukaku's performance against Arsenal in game week 2. Now, of course, we don't yet have loads of underlying stats for him because he's only just rejoined the league. But what we can see is he has some definite potential. And for me anyway, he certainly passed that eye test in that game against Arsenal at the weekend. He had Mari on toast and it was like, well, it was a joy to watch, to be honest, even as a Tottenham fan, watching the way that Chelsea played. He was like, you said earlier, the missing piece in the jigsaw. Definitely. He was the thing that they were missing last season, I think.
The one thing I do want to do, though, is I do want to see a bit more. For 11.5 million, I want to be absolutely sure that this guy is going to be captaincy material most weeks for me. And I like your comment before about what sacrifices we'll need to make in our team, because already immediately, when he scored that goal, I was immediately on the app having a look at how I get an 11.5 million striker in. And I have to say, I didn't like what I had to do to get to it. So unless he is absolutely essential and captaincy material, I don't like what I've got to do to my team and the sacrifices I've got to make. And if, I'll ask you later on what sacrifices you'd be willing to take for Lukaku. I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below. How would you get him? If you're going to go in early, or regardless of when you're going to get Lukaku, if you are thinking of the game, how would you do it? Who would have to go out?
Yeah, see, so I think for me, in order to get to him, you're going to have to sacrifice one of your big hitters, one of your premium players. So
is Salah or Fernandes?
You're talking Salah, you're talking Fernandes, or in my case, you're talking Son. Those are my 3 premium picks at the moment. One of them would have to be the sacrificial lamb to allow me to invest in Lukaku. Now, in principle, I'm open to changing my FPL team. I'm not completely close to it. Obviously, there's wildcards to be played, so that will have an element of kind of conversation, I guess, that comes into this. But the fixtures for Chelsea in the next 4 game weeks in particular, starting obviously with Liverpool in game week 3.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a really nice fixture against Aston Villa in game week 4, but then Spurs and Manchester City following on from that. They're not the best set of fixtures for lots and lots of goals. Liverpool are a good, solid defensive unit. Manchester City can be a good, solid defensive unit on their day. Yeah. Spurs have been solid so far. Touch wood, it continues. But
conceded a few big chances, Spurs, though. I don't know.
But 2 clean sheets. So, they've been all right. And those London derbies do tend to be a bit more cagey affairs. So I look at those 4 fixtures and think, if I'm buying Lukaku today, I'm basically buying him for Aston Villa, for that game in game week 4.
Okay.
If I wait for game week 7, there's 2 things that happen in game week 7. The Chelsea fixtures get lovely and the Man United fixtures turn for the worse.
Yes, yeah.
So in my head, that might be a moment where there's a conversation to be had about Bruno's future in comparison to what he can bring over Lukaku. But right now, I struggle to take Bruno Fernandes or Salah out of my teams given the fixtures that they have.
Yeah, it's tough, isn't it? That's the question is, so in my mind, it's not a question of do you or don't you. I'm pretty sure at some stage he's going to be in my team because he's going to be the focal point of this Chelsea team. And so let's discuss that for a moment. Let's discuss the impact that we think he's going to have on that Chelsea side. Now, I was talking in pre-season on the FPLFamily channel as well as this channel about how I expect Tuchel to have a good season. I think Chelsea were absolutely title contenders, even without him, actually. And I was looking at, not so much Werner because difficult season last season. Although I do think Werner could come to the fore, actually. Tuchel, some comments recently about how he's not afraid, or Tuchel won't be afraid, to maybe pair Lukaku up with the same way that Lukaku was paired up in a 2 with Lautaro in Serie A at Inter Milan.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a tie-up there with Werner or Havertz, or maybe we should look a bit lower down the price points and look at Mason Mount at 7 million. What do you think his impact is going to be on the broader Chelsea team? So this is a question really for those that are looking at Chelsea and going, oh, I don't like what I have to do to get Lukaku, but I could get a Mount, or I could get a Havertz, or I could even get a, say it quietly, Timo Werner. Who knows?
So I think for me this is a really interesting question because there are a number of big teams that I look at. Liverpool are a prime example of that, where I look at that team and there are 2 or 3 standout players. There's Salah, there's Trent, there's Jota. Otherwise, I'm not really that interested in the rest of the team from an FPL
R.I.P.
perspective.
Tsimikas.
I mean, if Tsimikas was going to play every week, he would absolutely have just appeared in that list, but he's not. And then I look at Manchester United, and again, it's a limited pool of players that I would be willing to choose from.
Sure.
Same at Spurs, same at City, but just purely because there's so many of them and they get rotated so many that there's a very small list. But I look at that Chelsea team, they're fairly consistent in terms of the starters. Like Tuchel is not the biggest tinkerer in the world in comparison to some others that we have in the league.
Sure.
Players like Mason Mount, players like Havertz, I would be expecting them to get regular minutes in the Chelsea team. Surely Lukaku's presence in the Chelsea team only bolsters their appeal to us as FPL assets too. So I'm kind of looking at Chelsea thinking, yes, I would really like to own Lukaku, but I do want to keep Salah and I do want to keep Bruno and I do want Son and I would like Kane, and it doesn't work. The maths won't add up.
What was interesting for me is, particularly from that Arsenal game, and that's all we've got to go on right now in terms of his performance. And don't get me wrong, sorry Arsenal fans, but I'm going to say it. I thought he had Mari in his back pocket, didn't he?
Yeah.
And it was, I think, Holding as well was there. Now, of course, Arsenal fans, I get it. Gabriel's still out. Ben White out with COVID. You've got a lot of players to come back. I understand that. But as soon as I saw Lukaku on that team sheet, I thought he is going to boss these two. And he did. And what they ended up doing was, or what he ends up doing is, he's such a handful for centre-halves that they often have to double up on him, or sometimes treble up on him. You could see like Mari was just like, oh my God, help me. And Holding was going over there to help him. Well, what happened was that meant Arsenal were narrower.
Yeah.
And that meant that the wider areas of the pitch were absolutely bossed by Alonso and Reece James.
Yeah.
And we know what we're going to get from a Tuchel side, I think, mostly this season, because we saw it at Dortmund, was, attacking down those flanks.
Yes.
I think Lukaku, yes, absolutely. Werner, Havertz, Mount, you've mentioned all the midfielders. Don't forget the fullbacks. I think suddenly Reece James at 5.5 is great value.
But I think you can So this is my conversation, I guess. In my opinion at the moment, my view on what I think I will do with Chelsea is not buy Lukaku. And instead, I'll buy Mount. And if Reece James continues to play, which I think he will, if he does, I'll buy him. And I'll have the Chelsea double up in that way. I've spent near enough the same price as I would have spent on Lukaku on the 2 of them.
Yeah.
A little bit more, but not a lot. And I filled up 2 spaces in my FPL team. And that's what this is all about at the end of the day. It's about budgeting for the right players at the right time. I think what you said before about Chelsea is really important. They are going to be a force this season. They've already shown that over the past couple of game weeks. And that will only continue, I think, throughout the rest of the season. This game against Liverpool in Game Week 3 will be really, really interesting watch, I think. So I'm keen to invest in Chelsea. But if I go Lukaku, I'm probably just going Lukaku.
Yeah.
Whereas if I go James, if I go Mount, if I go Havertz, I can have more than one of them. And I think he makes them much more attractive because he's likely to finish the chances they create rather than being offside or wasting them as we saw last year.
Yeah, they're absolutely all on my radar. I have to say Reece James looks good, and I get the feeling, in the same way that Trent has actually, he's kind of bulked up a little bit, Reece James. He's kind of, obviously these younger players, you forget how young they are because they've been and done it in the Premier League already. Reece James already got the Champions League under his belt, right? It's ridiculous. But then you see them like year to year and they're physically growing, they're growing up, they're getting older, getting bulkier. And James, I think, looks great this season. I am, of course, going to be, I don't think going to be bringing him in ahead of Liverpool, Reece James, but I'll be scouting him definitely at that game at Anfield and then at Stamford Bridge against Villa with a view to bringing in Chelsea assets come game week 7. And of course, game week 7 is a sort of period of time, it's a sort of game week where a lot of FPL managers are looking at the wild card. So is that, in your view, the best strategy, just to wait? Is it to sleep on Lukaku until game week 7? Because I think that's a bit dangerous.
It is dangerous, but then the fixtures are such that you potentially can.
Yeah.
Liverpool, Spurs, Man City, you could potentially get away with it. He might get one in each of those games. Will he get more than one in each of those games?
I think it's such a great dynamic, though, because in the FPL community, there will be a lot that are thinking the way that we are. I'm a relatively, especially early on in the season, a fairly safe manager. So to go out there and spend 11.5 and rip my team up for Lukaku, I'm probably not going to do it until game week 7.
We should have had Mr. Southern's guest on this, though, because he's brought in Lukaku.
And that's what I love about the FPL community on Twitter at the minute, is it is quite split. Yeah. And I think the majority probably will do what we're doing and wait for 7, wait for the wildcard, play it safer. So if you have the cojones to go early in on Lukaku, I think he could be a great differential, because by 7, he's probably not going to be quite such a differential.
All right, well, let's compare him then to Harry Kane, because that's going to be a big choice. Okay. Now we obviously have had news today from him, the man himself, so you kind of trust it, that he's going to be staying at Spurs this summer.
This summer, yeah, whatever that means, Harry.
Whatever that means, Harry. So Harry versus Rom, because I kind of think that suddenly we never really had a choice in the attacking forward line last season. If you wanted a premium, you went Harry Kane, because Aguero wasn't playing much, and Jamie Vardy was in and out. But there wasn't really another premium option. And I sort of feel that is the same this season too. There wasn't another premium option. In fact, there just wasn't a premium option in attack until game week 2.
Yeah.
When Lukaku appeared. So all the chatter in the early part of this week was about, how do I move for Lukaku? What do I need to do with my team, and when do I need to do it? Well, today, obviously, with the news from Harry Kane, it's now not only how do I move for Lukaku, but how do I move for Kane if I want to go there, and which one is the better option? Right. Because Kane's going to cost you more. He's currently 12.3 in the game, 2 price drops for him so far. That's substantially more than you've got a budget for Lukaku, and we're already finding it hard. So what's your opinion on Lukaku versus Kane?
So right now, I would absolutely go Lukaku. And the reason I go Lukaku is, yes, there's a bit of saving there, but, and you won't like this, he's fundamentally playing a better team. Lukaku is in a better team. Chelsea, I think... He's not
playing with Son, though.
For sure going to be title favourites, but look at the talent that's around him. And they're going to... I'm not saying the team isn't built around Harry Kane at Spurs, but it's I think watching this kind of new Spurs team with Kane in it now is going to be really interesting for the next 3 or 4 weeks. I'm fascinated to see how it plays out, because I think Nuno has been working with that team the whole summer on how am I going to play in a system without Harry Kane. We've already seen it in the first couple of game weeks, the front 3. And not only that, it's working. Son as the main man with the 2 off him, Lucas Moura and Bergwijn playing really well. So does Kane automatically come back in and fit into that system? I think you've got to play him because he's Harry Kane. But has he been training in that system? Have they got that understanding that Nuno wants them to have? So I'm not saying don't buy Harry Kane. If you want to buy Harry Kane, go there, right? It's very, very expensive. For me, I've got to see if he comes back and hits the ground running as he is. So right now, we've already seen Lukaku come in. And as soon as they signed him, the 97 million was put in the bank. I was like, that's perfect for Chelsea. absolutely perfect. And all right, he's up against Marion Holding, and that rhetoric's been done. He will give Van Dijk and Matip a torrid time at Anfield, no doubt about it. Then he's got to go to Villa up against Tyrone Mings, another good battle. There's going to be a couple of really good battles. And I hate to bring out that rhetoric because it's such an easy rhetoric to get out there in terms of, oh, he's just a big, strong striker. He's way more than that, Lukaku. And if you read what in particular the Sky Italian press have said on the move, he's a different player. He's developed. He's technically better in the last 2 seasons. He's really honed his game from being just the big burly striker that maybe we saw at Everton, at Manchester United previously. So he is, I think, it looks a totally different player. Yeah. And that in that system, whether it's a 2-up or it's not, whether he plays with maybe 3 up top there, Tuchel, in the way that Belgium maybe play a bit more like that, I think he's got the opportunity to thrive in a really good team. So I would go Lukaku right now.
I mean, there's a lot of conversation about how Lukaku is basically just a flat track bully and he will wipe the floor with the lesser opposition, for want of a better way of saying it. But actually, his record against the bigger clubs while at Inter was really good, like his goal scoring record against them. So I don't think that over the next 4 weeks he's not going to score goals. I don't think that that's the case at all. I suspect that Lukaku will bring goals against the likes of Liverpool, Spurs and City. I suspect that he will be scoring FPL points for those that are brave and go now. But I think his potential for huge FPL hauls really comes into its own from game week 7. And at that point, of course, we will have a clearer understanding of what does Spurs look like with Kane in it. And we will have a clearer understanding of what on earth are we prepared to do with Salah. Can he be Jota to save us some money? What are we prepared to do to Bruno because the fixtures change?
So just to finish on this then, let's go to, okay, we've decided we want Lukaku now. We're buying into the Mark Sutherland's rhetoric. We want Lukaku in our teams now. With your team as it is right now, how would you get him? What are the sacrifices you've got to make?
I would probably have to... I'd probably have to lose Son. Mm-hmm. But I don't even think that would be enough because I wouldn't want to sacrifice Antonio to bring him in.
Definitely not in a minute.
So it'd have to be Tony, which means that I need extra money. So it would then have to go to... It would be Bruno or Salah. Or Son and Trent. You'd have to either lose Son and Trent
and for a hit, presumably, that sounds like.
And I've already done 2 transfers this week, so it'd be an 8-point hit to do this, which is why I'm not doing it this week.
No.
So I'm not prepared to lose Trent and Son. That's way too much. Would I be prepared to lose one of my premiums in Salah and Bruno? Not at the moment, because the fixtures for Liverpool and Man United are really nice, and I can see them outscoring Lukaku. Will I be prepared to sacrifice Bruno come game week 7? I might, because the fixtures aren't great.
All right.
So I'm going to wait.
So for me, it would be absolutely not get rid of Antonio right now.
You've got Grealish though. Could you sacrifice Grealish?
Well, the one I would look to move out for my front line is Danny Ings, and as much as I feel pretty lucky, to be honest, to have the returns I've had from Danny Ings. He's had a penalty from his only shot on target in the 97th minute, and a worldie which he's not going to score very often, right? He's had a very low XG on that bicycle kick, no doubt about it. Have they looked all right, Villa? No, I think there's something like the bottom 3 or 4 in terms of XGC and XG created, in terms of their chances created. So they're not really creating many chances. It's just because he's Danny Ings and he's clinical. He's tucked one away. So I do feel very lucky to have the points that I've had from Danny Ings. And they do have a bit of a fixture turn in 4 or 5. So I was absolutely earmarking an Ings to Calvert-Lewin move anyway. But of course, Ings to Lukaku is, what is that? He's 8, isn't he? So that would be 3.5 million. So where do I find that 3.5 million? It's very difficult. I would have to downgrade Grealish for a start, and he'd have to go to maybe a 4.5.
Billy Gilmore,
so I'd have to go to somebody like that. Yeah, in actual fact, would that do it for me? Yes, it would. That would be my 3.5. So I'd have to lose Ings and Grealish for Lukaku and a 4.5. So it would disrupt my midfield to some degree. It would mean me going a bit heavier up top. But then I would be playing with, a 4.0 at the back. I'd be having a Livramento and a Gilmore and a dud striker. So having Lukaku would completely upset my squad. I'd have no bench really to call upon week to week. It would be a difficult thing to do. And by the way, I'm not gagging to get rid of Grealish because he's had a reasonable start, a bit fortuitous with the goal in game week 2, but he's Norwich up next and the fixtures look all right. And if you were going to go in on the pet roulette right now, I think Grealish is a reasonable chip to play, seems to get the game time. Plus, I'm not ready to sell Danny Ings yet. And I think there's other value in that striker spot. That's the thing for me, is that 11.5, a hell of a lot of money for Lukaku. But there are other options that are 3 or 4 million less, which aren't that bad.
Yeah, I mean, that's something we haven't
talked about.
It's
a whole other video.
Is that, yes, Lukaku, but 7.5, 8 offers a lot of value right now.
Not on penalties either, because you'd assume Jorginho's on them still.
I mean, I guess so. We'll find out. We'll find out. So this is why I want to wait. Because there's so many unknowns.
All right. So there we go, guys. Let us know in the comments below. What are you doing? Are you going straight into Lukaku? Are you going to take that chance on the new Chelsea man and give you a head start, a bit of a differential before the inevitable pylon
and the price
in Game Week 7 and the probably price rise if he does well in the next few weeks. At Game Week 7, he's not going to be 11.5. He's going to be 11.7, maybe 11.8. Let us know what you're doing, guys. Maybe you're going, no, absolutely not. Harry Kane's back. I'm going to have Harry Kane, or absolutely not. Dominic Calvert-Lewin, Danny Ings, Ollie Watkins, Antonio. So much value in that mid-price forward bracket. Maybe we don't need Lukaku. Who knows? Or maybe you're thinking, actually, the impact that he's going to have on that broader Chelsea team, it's going to bring the fullbacks into play. It's going to bring Mason Mount, Havertz onto the radar. Maybe even Timo Werner. Yes, I'm going to say Timo Werner again, guys. Let us know in the comments below. Hope you enjoyed the new big question video here on the Fantasy Football Scout channel. We'll see you this time next week for the next big question, which will become apparent at the end of Game Week 3, I suspect. See you next time, guys.
Bye, guys.